Hello everyone and welcome back to Lost Planeswalker. You're here with me, Jesse, the Lost Planeswalker. And have you ever wanted to play a Birthing Pod style deck, but with artifacts? Well, you're in luck, because we have Iron Man, Titan of Innovations. Let's see how Iron Man works and we can dive into how that Birthing Pod effect actually works with him. So, Iron Man, Titan of Innovation, 3 blue and a red. Legendary artifact creature, human hero. Iron Man has flying and haste, which I think is probably pretty important. He's a 5-drop commander. Being able to evade and then swing in very quickly is what Iron Man does, and it's going to help us get this strategy going. But, Genius, Industrialist, whenever Iron Man attacks, create a treasure token. Then you may sack a non-creature artifact. If you do, search your library for an artifact card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrificed artifact's mana value, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Iron Man brings a level of interesting play strategy that Artifacts hasn't really had before, at least to this extent. Sure, you can search for artifacts using spells, being able to set up loops or paths you can go down, but a routine basis brings a lot of fun being able to, get these cards and these strategies going routinely. Really is something really fun for Artifacts. So this deck is going to be laid out. We're going to start by looking at Artifacts and the number of different ways we can build around our strategy, whether that's getting really good utility pieces or getting some combo cards out, just your way of working up that ladder. Next, I want to talk about win con and game engine creatures that are going to, help us end the game. And then lastly, we're going to look at some new cards that will help us out with this strategy and some good stuff. Before we dive into those, I want to quickly mention some of the other Secret Lair cards you can add for flavor to this deck coming out in this Secret Lair drop.
So let's start out by looking at those Secret Lair cards with Earth's Mightiest Emblem, or Arcane Signet, and this is a special one that if you ended up buying, I think $200 worth of Secret Lair product, can end up getting, which is stupid, but hey, if you're really wanting a really expensive Arcane Signet, here it is. We also have Commander Plate, Galvanic Blast, Inventor's Fair, and Soul Ring, and all of the rest of those are coming out in the Iron Man Titan of Innovation Secret Lair package. There wasn't any additional ones from the other Secret Lairs coming out that I think would work in this deck. So now let's dive into those artifacts, starting with combo artifacts, because I think obviously this is where you're going to get the most potential. We have Helm of the Host, Scrap Trawler, and Trionic Resonator. Helm of the Host, if you've never played it, at the beginning of combat on your turn, whatever creature is equipped to it, it makes a copy of that creature. And if that creature is legendary, it creates a non-legendary copy of it. So we can basically double up our Iron Man triggers, which is going to be very powerful. Similarly, Scrap Trawler takes advantage of you sacking those artifacts and says when this or another artifact you control is put in the graveyard from the battlefield, return to your hand target artifact card in your graveyard with lesser mana value. This is going to take advantage of us putting some really good stuff in the bin and being able to put it into our hand to then cast it again. And then Trionic Resonator says to tap copy triggered ability you control, you may choose new targets for the copy. So for just 2 mana, we can get a second Birthing Pod style trigger with Iron Man, which is very good. One of the most powerful ways that artifacts can kind of impact the board are top deck manipulation or casting, colorless spells. So we're going to look at Crystal Skull, ISO Spyglass, Encroaching, Mycosynth, and Mystic Forge. Crystal Skull, ISO Spyglass is 2 blue legendary artifact. You may look at the top card of your library anytime, and you may play historic lands and cast historic spells from the top of your library. Artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic. So there's a really cool play pattern with being able to look at the top of your library and then cast historic lands. I think that this is super powerful in an artifact deck, and I've been putting this in a ton of decks recently because I think it's just that good, and I think it's going to be even better in Iron Man here. Encroaching Mycosynth, 3 in a blue artifact, non-land permanents you control are artifacts in addition to other types. The same is true for permanent spells you control and non-land permanent cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. This essentially turns on Iron Man and makes so everything is an artifact, meaning that we can get things that aren't just artifacts. Now, we do have a clause saying we can't sack, non-creature artifacts. So we have to make sure that, whatever we're sacking is still, a non-creature, but it turns anything in our deck into an artifact, meaning whenever we use this Birthing Pod style ability, now we can get enchantments or any number of other things out of our deck that doesn't have to be specifically an artifact, which I think is very powerful. And then Mystic Forge, a classic card for artifact. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast artifact spells and colorless spells from the top of your library, and you can pay 1 life and exile the top card of your library. Very, very good. And because we're going to be casting a ton of stuff, we want to discount that. And we have some classic discount artifacts here with Cloud Key, Enthusiastic, Mechanaut, and Semblance Anvil. So Cloud Key, 3 artifact. As it enters, choose artifact, creature, enchantment, instant, or sorcery. Spells you cast the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. This is a really, really great card because whether we're going to be casting artifacts with this or we're at a good point and we have some other stuff in our hand we want to end up discounting, well, we can choose to do that too. Enthusiastic Mechanaut is a blue and a red artifact, creature, goblin, artificer with flying, and artifact spells cost 1 less to cast. Very, very nice here. But Semblance Anvil I think is even better, and this is a card I haven't played a lot, but I'm actually going to look at playing more because it's 3 artifact imprint. When this enters, you may exile a non-land card from your hand. Spells you cast that share a card type with the exiled card cost 2 less to cast. I hadn't really realized that this was even a card, but we have a lot of artifact creatures in this deck, meaning that creatures and artifacts now get discounted because they're dual type, and this only cares if it shares a type with the card exiled. So we can get a ton of discount and really go crazy with this card. So, you know, this is very, very cool. Next up, I want to talk about duplicating some stuff while also searching. So we have Esoteric Duplicator, Master Transmuter, and Mirrorworks. Esoteric Duplicator, 2 and a blue artifact clue. Whenever you sack this or another artifact, you may pay 2. If you do, at the beginning of the next end step, create a token that's a copy of that artifact. 2, sacrifice this and draw a card. So Tony Stark has us sacrifice stuff in order to get something out of our library, meaning that whatever we sacrifice, if we have Esoteric Duplicator out, we can just pay 2 and get that back onto the battlefield. And as we start sacrificing more and more expensive stuff, it's going to be an even better payout for just 2 mana. Master Transmuter, one of my favorite Artificer cards, because 3 and a blue artifact, creature, human, artificer. Blue, tap or turn an artifact you control to its owner's hand. You may put an artifact from your hand onto the battlefield. This is a great way to cheat out some really big stuff for free. Tony Stark actually makes a treasure token, and we can trade a treasure token for, you know, one of our most expensive cards in our deck, and it's just essentially free, which is really cool. And then Mirrorworks, 5 artifact. Whenever another non-token artifact enters battlefield under your control, you may pay 2. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that artifact. This is just a great way to get double up here. This will also work with our creatures, so if we have any artifact creatures entering, we can double those up for just 2 mana as well, which is really great. But the last thing I want to talk about artifact-wise before we move into some of the game ender cards are cheap advantage artifacts that you see played in decks like this, but work especially well in Iron Man. So we have Chromatic Star, Ichor Wellspring, and Mycosynth Wellspring. So Chromatic Star is a single mana artifact. 1 tap, sack it, add 1 mana of any one color. When this is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. We can get this onto the battlefield with a treasure token. If we need to fix our mana, we can fix our mana with it, but we can also just sacrifice this to get another card like Ichor Wellspring and then draw a card in the process. Now Ichor Wellspring here says when it enters or is put in the graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. This is just a great stepping stone piece. Similarly, Mycosynth Wellspring is another great stepping stone piece that says when it enters the battlefield or is put in a graveyard from the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. Blue and red are not known for their ability to search up lands, so Mycosynth Wellspring is a very nice welcome here. Some of those other artifacts are Auton Soldier, Brutaclad, Telechor Engineer, Commander Sphere, Embercleave, Ethereum Sculptor, Foundry Inspector, Hexplate Wallbreaker, Eidolon of Oblivion, Joyous Familiar, Machine God's Effigy, Metalwork Colossus, Mindstone, Nettlecyst, Phyrexian Metamorph, Prize Statue, Rings of Brighthearth, Thought Monitor, Thought Vessel, 3 Dynamo, Wayfarer's Bauble, and World Waker Helm.
Now, before we look at those game enders, I would just like to say thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe. It would mean the world to me. And if you enjoyed this and enjoy what I do, please check out my Patreon down below. It would mean a lot. So now let's look at those game ending effects in this deck.
Now, coming back, we're going to look at some game ender cards that I think are going to be really powerful, and not all of these are going to be like you just play this and win, but they're going to be able to give you an inherent advantage that I think is just going to take over the game if they can't be answered. So we have Cyberdrive Awakener, Hellkite Tyrant, and Kappa Cannoneer. Cyberdrive Awakener is a really, really fun artifact creature for 5 in a blue. Flying, other artifacts you control have flying, and when Cyberdrive Awakener enters battlefield, until the end of your turn, each non-creature artifact you control becomes an artifact creature with base power and toughness 4/4. This is going to turn our board into a lethal threat that we can just kind of wipe it. It's almost essentially an overrun, except we don't have evasion here. We just hope that we have enough artifacts to kind of get through and end the game. Now, Hellkite Tyrant for red creature dragon with flying and trample is going to help us get a ton more artifacts, because whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we gain control of all artifacts that player controls, which is really great. Now, if we're playing against somebody who has a ton of treasure, they're probably going to sacrifice those treasure tokens in response to make it so they don't lose all that artifacts actually giving it to us. But it also has this other clause here that says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 20 or more artifacts, you win the game, which is pretty sick. And then Kappa Cannoneer, 5 in a blue artifact creature, Turtle Warrior, with Improvise, meaning that your artifacts can help pay for this. But it has Ward 4, which is pretty beefy, and whenever Kappa Cannoneer or another artifact enters battlefield under control, put a +1/+1 counter on Kappa Cannoneer, and it can't be blocked this turn. If we're generating a ton of artifacts, this can easily get to 10, 20, maybe even 30 power if we're just popping out artifacts left and right. So I think Kappa Cannoneer is a game ender because it can't be blocked. It's got Ward 4, meaning that, you know, it's going to take somebody's entire turn probably to get the spell to kill this. So I think it's very, very good. The other three we have here are Mechanized Production, Mirrodin Besieged, and Urza Lord High Artificer. So Mechanized Production is 2 blue, enchant artifact you control. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted artifact. Then if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name as this one, you win the game. So basically we can pick an artifact, whether that's a treasure token we're generating every turn or some other artifact in our deck. Maybe it's something that's giving us value, like a discount artifact, or, you know, something else that's just really powerful. This is going to make it so if we have 8 of those, we win, and it's a pretty sneaky way, you know, especially if you have a ton of one token already and you kind of just cast this and nobody realizes it. But Mechanized Production is probably well known, and it's a fun add to this deck. Mirrodin Besieged, 2 and a blue enchantment. As it enters, choose Mirrodin or Phyrexian. When you cast an artifact spell, for Mirrodin, create a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token or Phyrexian at the beginning of your end step. Draw a card, then discard a card. Then if there are 15 or more artifact cards in your graveyard, target opponent loses the game. Very, very likely we're going to get up to 15 artifact cards in this deck, so we can make our opponents just lose the game. And then Urza Lord High Artificer. Of course, this is a no-brainer. Like I said, not all of these are particularly game enders in this deck, but it's going to help us propel us there very, very quickly. Urza makes a big construct that gets bigger for each artifact we control. We can tap artifacts to generate mana, and then we can pay 5 to shuffle our library and just cast spells off the top for free. So Urza here is a very powerful win con card that's just going to make this deck even more powerful. But lastly, I want to talk about some good stuff cards here, and I'll talk about some new cards that I think are really fun, with Desynchronization, One with the Machine, and Trash for Treasure. Desynchronization is 2 blue instant. Return each non-land permanent that's not historic to its owner's hand. This will make sure all of our artifacts, legendaries, and we don't have any sagas in the deck, but if we did, stay on the battlefield, allowing us to play a card like Cyberdrive Awakener and kind of just end the game. One with the Machine is 3 blue sorcery. Draw cards equal to the highest converted mana cost among artifacts you control. The highest converted mana cost we have in this deck is 11 with Metalwork Colossus, so I think paying 4 mana, draw 11 cards is pretty powerful. And then Trash for Treasure, 2 in a red sorcery. As an additional cost, cast a spell, sacrifice an artifact, return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is just a great piece, letting us return something really powerful straight into our deck. Some other good stuff cards we have here are An Offer You Can't Refuse, Big Score, Blasphemous Act, Chaos Warp, Counterspell, Dramatic Reversal, Emery Lurker the Lock, Goblin Welder, Jessica's Will, Joyra, Weatherlight Captain, Rapid Hybridization, Thoughtcast, Untimely Malfunction, and that is it. There is a pretty nice maybe board here, and really the maybe board consists of cards that I think were either not powerful enough or just way too expensive to include in a more budget-friendly deck. So if you want to look at some of the options that I included that are a little bit more mana cost as well as expensive to buy, you know, check that out. The land base also is built out at a pretty simple amount. It's around $80, so it's affordable, and you probably already own most of the cards in this land base.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this Iron Man Commander deck video. Comment down below on what you think about the cards that I added, what you would cut, what would you add to this deck. And if you would also leave me a like, share this video with a friend, and subscribe, that would mean the world to me, so thank you, thank you, thank you. Now today's Scryfall card of the day is Fling. About halfway to the target, Snook vowed that he had been tricked for the last time. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.